I knew that everything was not as it seemed when I arrived at my parents' house. We were all going to a family dinner, but something was wrong. My suspicions were confirmed when I opened the car door and heard my father and my son arguing. "Damn it, Grandpa, this is wrong. Watch your language, boy. Remember whose house you are in. I don't care whose house it is. I'm not going to participate in this." "Bradley!" Mom shouted. Brad rushed out the door and froze in front of me. He was still frowning, but his eyes widened in surprise. "Dad, I'm sorry, but I didn't participate in this." "What?" I asked, fighting the bad feeling growing in my stomach. We turned and watched together as the trio walked out onto the porch. My parents and my fiancée Karen were standing there. Each face told its own story. The father had his typical impassive stone face, and the mother had a decisive one. Karen's face showed a mixture of fear and worry. "This is wrong!" Brad shouted at them before shaking his head in disgust and turning to me. "Run, Dad, it's a trap," he said decisively. "Mom is there." I felt my stomach churn and I must have let out a loud groan. The thought of confronting my ex-wife even 2 years later still made me feel sick. I didn't have the anger and bitterness I once felt towards her, but the aftermath of the divorce made me try to erase her from my life. I only spoke to her twice after I found out about her cheating. The first was the night I left, and the second was shortly after she was served with the divorce papers. I silently watched as my son walked up to his car, got into it, and quickly drove away. Surprisingly, I felt peace. I struggled with this, and my feelings about it were clear, but other feelings told me I needed this. Their trap has been sprung, their choice has been made, and regardless of intentions, there will now be consequences. Anyway, now I need to deal with my situation. In an abstract sense, it was like skydiving, jumping, or perhaps being thrown out of an airplane. A person can scream and cry, pray and urinate, but he will still fall. If the parachute opens, he will likely survive the experience. It was this gallows wisdom that made me calmly assess my current situation. Like what happens during many life-threatening moments, my life flashed before my eyes. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to enjoy the good times and ended up focusing on the last few years with Deirdre. We had a good 26-year marriage, not very good, but certainly not bad. We met in college, got married, got jobs, had 3 kids, bought cars and a house, a suburban dream. Looking back, if there were any signs of impending disaster, I never saw them. Deirdre and I would never be mistaken for beautiful people, and we were never considered part of the popular crowd. We're pretty average. I'm sort of tall, but thin. At 6 feet 2 inches tall and 170 pounds, some even consider me skinny. My curly black hair and large nose indicate my Mediterranean heritage. My black glasses and pocket protector identify me as a nerd. Engineer. Deirdre looks like she stepped out of a Harry Potter fan convention. A tall, thin, geeky librarian. She is 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighs only 130 pounds. She always had long, straight brown hair, and large framed glasses seemed to make her dark brown eyes look bigger. Even though she wasn't any kind of model, I always liked her long body and tiny breasts. I thought she was beautiful, and until that day, she was the woman of my dreams. I won't say that everything was perfect at home. We argued, as a rule, about money. I was doing a good job as an engineer, and Deirdre was a technician at a large local corporation. But we had a lot of expenses over the last decade. Buying a new home, putting 3 kids through college, and paying for 2 weddings left us in financial straits at times. Other than a new house, I wouldn't change anything. I guess I expected something different when we finally became empty nesters. We were both 47 years old, healthy, had a decent job, a house, and our sex life wasn't too bad. It was quite conservative, but we got together at least once a week. Our personal life, however, was a little more problematic. I tried to keep the romantic fire going, but it was a challenge. We tried to meet once a week, but with our jobs and other distractions, it was more like once a month. After our youngest child, Brad, left for college, Deirdre threw herself into her work. She was already highly regarded within her company, But with her new intensity, she was quickly put in charge of a huge corporate project. She led a large team to rewrite training materials for a corporation. The amount of time she spent at work soon replaced money as the biggest obstacle in our marriage. I was proud of her, but the fervor with which she threw herself into her project sometimes frightened me. It seemed that work had become the main priority in her life. 15 months later, she completed the project, receiving high praise from senior management. She and her team did such a great job that they were nominated for several national awards from both the National Technical Writers Association and the professional association to which her company belonged. I went to watch her receive her award at the National Technical Writers Conference. I was very proud of her, even though the project had monopolized her time for the past year. Deirdre beamed, basking in recognition. A month later, the annual conference of the Corporation Association took place, which turned into a real circus. It was huge compared to the previous conference, since technical literature was only one of several recognized categories. Deirdre's team was so large that her company agreed to pay travel expenses for each employee, but not for spouses. I had spent most of my holiday, and we had already spent on the previous conference, so Deirdre went to this one alone. She shared a room with another woman from her office. It wasn't a big deal since she had been going to conferences without me for years, but if I had known what would happen during those 4 days in Chicago, I would have found a way to be there. As they say, hindsight is strong. At the time, I didn't even realize that my marriage was broken. Deirdre returned sick. She said she caught some kind of flu and was sick last night. Luckily, it didn't happen at the awards banquet, but at a reception afterwards. She drank a little at the reception and became very ill. At least that's what I thought for 3 months, until an unexpected visit happened. Mrs. Jordan was a very well-dressed, attractive woman in her 60s. She was also the wife of Thomas Jordan, Deirdre's vice president of operations. I met him several times at corporate events. He was a respectable, fit man of about 50 with gray hair. He always seemed a little arrogant to me, but I couldn't tell if that was his personality or just a byproduct of his position. My meeting with his wife was very enlightening. Obviously, Mr. Jordan has always had a thing for the ladies. She caught him having an affair early in their marriage, but they reconciled. She believed that after that he remained faithful to her for another 2 years. Then the lies and suspicions began again. 6 months ago, she had had enough. Mrs. Jordan hired someone to obtain evidence for her upcoming divorce. She told me that she had evidence of his long-term affair, but not with Deirdre. Unfortunately, she also had evidence of his night with my wife in Chicago. It looked like it was a one-night stand, but she wasn't sure. She stopped the investigation shortly after her trip to Chicago because she had everything she needed to get a divorce. The photographs she handed me of my wife and her husband were enough to make my heart stop beating. They showed dirty dancing in the ballroom. There were pictures of them kissing and even a few pictures of Jordan with his hands under my wife's little black dress, with a look of pure lust and ecstasy written all over Deirdre's face. They also sneaked into one of the hotel toilets. A few minutes later, they came out, and it was obvious that Deirdre's dress had been straightened and her makeup reapplied. Her face was flushed, and she was having what is commonly called fresh sex. The last set of photos showed them together as they entered his hotel room. Although none of them were too explicit, there was no doubt about what happened on the last night of the conference. Mrs. Jordan left me copies of her report and photographs. I immediately knew that my marriage was over. Could I survive a one-time mistake? Doubtful, but I think it was possible. However, whatever trust I still had was now gone. Her betrayal, when she hid it from me in the months that followed, was just as destructive to our marriage as her infidelity. That evening when I returned home, Deirdre was working late again. I wondered if she was actually working or dating Jordan or anyone else behind those security office doors. That's the point, isn't it? Once trust is broken, it's a pain in the ass to ever get it back. In most cases, it never returns. And if it does return, it is not the same as before. The poison of doubt insidiously permeates every area, causing one to question every action, past and present. Things that were once considered simply innocent are now viewed with suspicion. By the time Deirdre got home, I was half ready. I left copies of the most incriminating photographs on the table. Coming out of the bedroom with my suitcases, I saw her sadly sitting in the kitchen. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Billy," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry, but not enough to be honest with me, right?" I grinned. "Would you ever tell me?" "No," she whispered, and a tear rolled down her cheek. As I left, I slammed the door. 4 days later, she was served with divorce papers. In the first days, she tried to call me several times, but I was extremely rude. I told her there was nothing she could say to change the situation and asked her to never contact me again. Was this extreme? Of course, but I was hurt. The pain she caused. So her feelings meant nothing at the time. I didn't try to cut Deirdre out of my life. I needed time to take my mind off her and think during those first few weeks. I was hurt and I was angry, but I was still struggling to get through the divorce. All I knew was that it was a one-time thing, but even if it was, the trust we once had was gone. I didn't know if I could live with the type of marriage that would stay. Of course, all my friends and relatives had their own opinions. Some thought I should leave the cheater, but most felt I should try to reconcile since we spent so many years on it. My parents were the noisiest. I thought about it for a long time, but in the end I decided that I needed to move on. This was not a popular decision. The barrage of disapproval from my parents, children, and friends was overwhelming. I soon found myself constantly defending my decision, faced with a long line of people trying to persuade me to give Deirdre another chance. Constant questions about why I couldn't forgive her were accompanied by my constant objections, about why, if she loved me so much, she couldn't keep her legs together. Every discussion seemed to turn into an argument. I soon became tired and angry that they were treating me like it was my fault we were getting a divorce, and I told them all that Deirdre and I's divorce was a dead topic. I loudly stated that I would have nothing to do with any conversation or people who could not respect that. Some understood my decision, many did not. The clashes with those who did not understand this were sometimes disgusting. When she was mentioned, I just got up and left. Quietly if I was allowed, loud and rude if not. Unsurprisingly, publicly suggesting to prospective friends that since it is excusable and not a marriagey killer, I could borrow their wives for the weekend just for sex, did not go well. Like telling them I'm moving on, and if it offends them, they can shove it up their ass. During this time, I lost several friends. My children reluctantly supported my decision, although I knew they hoped that somehow their parents' marriage could survive. They were shocked and angry at their mother, but did not abandon her. However, I made it clear to them that they should not talk to me about her. While my children respect my decisions regarding their mother, my parents did not. My mother loved Deirdre and couldn't accept that we were getting a divorce. She is more than assertive and tends to reject opinions that do not coincide with her own. My father is a different type of assertive. He served as a sergeant in the army for 20 years. He'd been called an asshole countless times, but that was in a kind way. There are much worse words that are closer to the truth. Separately, they are difficult to deal with, but they can be dealt with. When they are both in harmony, they are a force of nature. Apparently, my divorce from my cheating ex-wife was considered unnatural because they bombarded me with their advice. They constantly reminded me of my responsibilities and obligations, regardless of Deirdre's actions. Unfortunately, it took threatening to sever all ties with them if they ever brought up my impending divorce again. I knew this would get their attention since I was the only child left that they still interacted with regularly. My older brother died in an accident 20 years ago. He was single and left no children. My two older sisters, Rose and Monica, were a completely different matter. They both stopped communicating due to their parents' constant interference in their marriages and families. Neither of them had spoken to their parents more than a few times in the last 10 years, so when I presented my ultimatum, my parents reluctantly agreed. Of course, I had one last meeting with Deirdre. A one-on-one meeting was her only requirement before she signed the divorce papers. I agreed. knowing it would hurt, and it did. "Bill, I'm really sorry," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that it only happened once. I understand that you don't have to believe me, but it's the truth." "You're right, Deirdre," I answered coldly. "It doesn't change anything, and I really shouldn't believe you. In fact, why do I need this?" I saw that my words hit the target, although she maintained her stoic appearance. Although, we must give her credit, she continued undaunted. "I would like to say that I was drunk, but not so drunk that I couldn't stop. So why?" She took a deep breath. "I wish I could answer this question easily, for both of our sakes. It's not that I wasn't satisfied at home. Okay, I guess that's not entirely true, is it? If I got everything I needed from you, I wouldn't fall so easily. So it's my fault?" I barked. "No!" she exclaimed, momentarily losing her composure. "Oh God, please don't think like that. I meant that you couldn't give me what I wanted. No one could. I needed your love and support, but I also needed to succeed on my own and receive approval from others. So no, you couldn't give me everything I wanted, no one could. It was my pride that allowed me to fall, my unshakable belief that I was in control of the situation. When we received our award, I was so caught up in celebrating my recognition that I became careless. I thought that everything worked out for me, that I was invincible. What does it feel like to be arrogant? When Mr. Jordan started showering me with praise, I enjoyed it. I was the center of attention, and people congratulated me everywhere I turned. This and the drinking made me careless. When he brought me to his room, I already knew what was going to happen. It was too late. I'll go to my grave regretting that I didn't stop him sooner. I can't say exactly why I gave up and went into his room. I know that I have already crossed too many boundaries and am guilty of betraying you. There were my actions at the party, teasing and groping, passionate kissing, and letting him grope me in the toilet. Her voice broke. She turned away and wiped her eyes. Turning to me, she pulled herself together and continued, "After this happened, I was devastated. I went to his bathroom and hid until he left. I looked in the mirror and saw that my unfaithful wife was looking at me. My guilt lay before me, and I could not hide it from my eyes. I saw my world slowly slipping off the edge of a cliff. I was fully aware that I was the one who pushed him, but now I was desperately trying to find a way to stop him. I know it doesn't seem like the truth, but I love you, Bill, and I need your love. It is your love and support that is the foundation on which I have built my life. When I returned home from the conference, I realized that I couldn't think of any scenario that involved confessing to you and saving our marriage. We both made it very clear throughout our marriage that cheating was a deal breaker and would end the marriage. I decided not to tell you. My reasons were selfish but practical at the same time. Just so you don't lose anything, right?" I grinned. Her face looked like I had hit her. My pain and anger began to boil over, and I didn't even try to hide my feelings. "I said that my reasoning was selfish," she said quietly. "I also knew that nothing good would come from confessing. I will never put myself in a situation like this again. This was the only mistake, and I will try to make sure it never happens again. I did not resign or apply for a transfer because I rarely communicated with Mr. Jordan except for weekly meetings. Besides, if I did that, you would become suspicious and start asking questions. You're smart, and would probably begin to suspect that something happened in Chicago that you didn't like. Billy, I love you, whether you believe me or not. The thought of you suffering because of my actions was more than I could bear. My guilt was overwhelming and more than enough for both of us. I decided to silently carry my shame for the rest of my life. I prayed to be given a second chance. I swore to heaven and any other deity that I would never fall like that again, and if given the opportunity, I would be the best wife anyone could ask for. Obviously, things didn't work out that way. Perhaps, I said coldly, heaven remembered the vows you made on our wedding day, and perhaps they knew, as I do now, that your promises were worthless. She silently looked at me with pleading eyes. She hoped, as did I, that there was a way to put back together what had been broken. Unfortunately, we both knew it was too late. After the meeting, Deirdre signed the divorce papers. They were fair and close to what a court would likely have determined. After that, I no longer communicated with her. A few months later, our divorce was final, and I found myself trying to move on. My children, Katie, Mary, and Brad, helped me get through the first year after my divorce. I wasn't as bad as I was during the divorce, but I was still bitter and sarcastic. I knew they were also a support for their mother, but I never asked, and they were kind enough not to tell me anything. My relationship with my parents is a completely different matter. They were strained at best. The ghost of my failed marriage seemed to be present every time we spoke. I don't know how long this went on, but then something changed. They met my fiancée. I didn't start dating until a few months after my divorce. It was bad. I don't know what I expected, but most of the women I dated had just as much baggage as I did. I'm sure many women couldn't wait for our dates to end, as my bitterness probably ruined their evenings. So I dragged myself for about 7 months until I met Karen. She changed my world. Karen was a curvy little bundle of joy. Her dark mane framed her beautiful face and huge, toothy smile. She was barely over 5 feet tall and carried about 30 extra pounds. Luckily, most of them were in her breasts and ass. She had been divorced for about 9 years when I met her. She came out of a very abusive marriage. Her only child, a son, unfortunately followed in the footsteps of his abusive father and left for parts. Unknown 3 years before we started dating. To say that behind her cheerful, bubbly facade was a scared woman with huge trust issues would be a huge understatement. When I took her to meet her parents, I wasn't sure how they would react. I should never have doubted Karen's ability to please others. She was just like that. They liked Deirdre, but they just adored Karen. She was accepted into the family after meeting them for the second time. Karen wasn't perfect, of course, and she had major trust issues, just like I did. But she breathed life into my dead existence, and I fell in love with her. I seriously fell in love with her. When I asked her to marry me, she agreed with some reservations, since we had only been dating seriously for about 6 months. The first condition was that our engagement would last at least a year so we wouldn't rush into it. The second condition is that we both need to get counseling so we don't carry baggage from our past marriages into our new one. A month later, we started family counseling. A lot of ugly little things were revealed on both sides. For the most part, we worked to overcome them. One of them was something Karen really struggled with. It was the fact that I refused to talk to my ex-wife. I was very open with Karen about my marriage and divorce. By then I could talk about it without getting angry or sad. I realized that Karen was worried that I might still have feelings for Deirdre. After 20-plus years of marriage, these feelings do not disappear overnight. Of course, they have changed now. The love I once felt for Deirdre was tainted with anger and bitterness. Any remaining love was now so diluted that it never threatened my love for Karen. I didn't see any benefit in delving into the past and reliving the pain of my divorce. Apparently, my thoughts and feelings about this matter did not suit her. "Well, son," the father grumbled, "are you going to build up your courage or are you going to run away like a coward?" "Please, Bill," Karen begged. "Talk to her." I nodded sadly and sighed. I silently walked up onto the porch. Mom came to hug me, but I retreated. "Don't touch me," I said coldly. I saw the pain on her face as she realized what her betrayal could cost her. I also noticed the look of horror on Karen's face as she stepped forward and shook my head. "Great," the father grinned. "Are you going to throw a tantrum again?" "Fuck you, old man," I snapped back. "One more shitty comment from you and I'll leave." "So, anything else you want to say, idiot?" My father's face turned bright red and the veins in his neck bulged. I wasn't sure he wouldn't have a stroke right away. We've had countless conflicts, but I've never attacked him like this before. He clenched his fists, and I thought he might actually take a swing at me. He was still in decent shape, but at 75, it wouldn't have been a fair fight. The sad truth was that it got to the point where I would hit my elderly father. What a sad state of affairs, I admitted to myself. Maybe it's really time to leave and start all over again? Surprisingly, he didn't do or say anything else. I walked past him into the house. The sight and smell immediately flooded me with memories. This has been my parents' home since my brother died. The furniture, the carpet, the walls, everything is imbued with the essence of my parents. This was my second home. I felt deep sadness as I realized that I might never set foot here again. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted when I saw her sitting in the living room. She stood up and I noticed that she had lost more weight than she should have. She looked tired, and her tired smile looked forced. Despite all this, I saw the woman I fell in love with many years ago. The pain I felt must have been written all over my face, and I saw her smile disappear. "Sorry, Billy," she said quietly. "I told them it was a very bad idea, but they didn't listen." She snorted and tried to hide a small smirk. "Your parents never listened to anyone." Now it was my turn to grin. There was a lot of truth in this statement. I felt the cold rage of their betrayal begin to build in my mind. I didn't realize it, but Deirdre's reaction told me that I couldn't hide my dark thoughts. "They really crossed the line this time, didn't they?" I nodded. "Past the point of no return?" she asked quietly. "I don't know, but it seems so to me. I'm really sorry. I tried to tell them, but I think they thought it was necessary if you and Karen wanted to have a future together. Billy, even though they're a pain in the ass, they really love you. For her part, so does Karen." "But not enough to respect my wishes, right?" I barked. Whether they thought my decision was childish, just stubborn, or just plain wrong, it was my decision, not theirs. This shows the lack of respect they have for me. At least the kids weren't part of it, although I'm a little surprised by your role. Well, I know that both Katie and Mary told them they wouldn't participate. Both told all three that it was a very bad idea and begged them not to do it. Brad was immersed in a big school project and didn't seem to understand what was going on. This is not surprising since he is completely focused on his studies and is trying to finish his studies at the end of the semester. As for me, everything is very simple. I looked at the woman who had been my world for over 2 decades and saw her squirm uncomfortably. There was a deep sadness in her that she never had while we were married. For some reason, it didn't give me the satisfaction I expected. "Billy," she said with a sad smile, "no matter what I say, and no matter how you react to my words, it will not worsen our relationship. I've already lost you. You already hate me, so I have nothing left to lose. When your parents asked me to do this, I initially refused them. Even though I had nothing to lose, I didn't want to hurt you anymore. Then Karen visited me, and we talked for a long time. She asked me to at least talk to you. I told her exactly what I was going to tell you, and although she didn't like it, she agreed that I should be honest. I told her that she was playing with fire, and no matter what I say or how you react to it, she could still easily lose you. Unfortunately, she had to do this. She really loves you, but she's afraid that you still have strong feelings for me. This is fear, plain and simple. The kids told me things about her and her past, and I'm sure a lot of it comes from there." We both stood looking at each other in awkward silence. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Okay, Deirdre," I gave in. "Say what you need to say. How do we do this? Billy, could you take a walk with me in the backyard?" I nodded silently, trying not to show my feelings. We walked silently through my parents' huge backyard, away from prying ears. She broke the silence with a whisper. "Sorry, Billy, you didn't deserve this. And now," she sighed sadly, "now I'll complicate everything." She smiled faintly at my surprise. "Billy, I was a fool, in so many ways. I knew I lost you when I slept with Mr. Jordan, but I never tried to show you how sorry I was. I saw it as futile, so I didn't try. But I was wrong. When we broke up, I felt so guilty that I tried to fulfill your wish, and we didn't communicate. I did this mainly to give you a break so you could try to figure out what you need to do. Unfortunately, it didn't work. I knew that many of our friends and relatives asked you not to divorce me. I tried to dissuade them, but it seems that I passed for a repentant sinner and only made things worse. Oh, I was truly remorseful and would have done anything to take back my stupidity and save our marriage. But my remorse seemed to spur on your parents and some of our friends. I'm sorry they made you feel like you had to put up a wall and never talk to me again. This is where I was wrong. I looked at her silently for several seconds. My embarrassment was obvious, and she smiled sadly. Even though I tried to give you space, I couldn't do one thing that would help us both heal afterwards. Whether it was hopeless or not, I had to do something, anything, to show you how much you meant to me. I started to say something, but she interrupted. I know it wouldn't have stopped the divorce, but it might have helped us live better after it. I had to make sure you saw that I was truly sorry, and I would have some peace of mind knowing that at least I tried to show you that. I can't tell you how much I regretted not doing this. How many times have I started calling you and arranging a meeting where I could at least try to talk to you, but you cut off all communication with me. I floundered for months trying to find a way to approach you, but then you met Karen. The kids told me a little about her and how she affects you. I can't say that I wasn't jealous, but then I realized that you had left. I also tried to move on. I wasn't as successful as you. Part of my problem was that I needed to end things with you. I needed to tell you something, but I didn't know how. Then this opportunity came along and I was given a second chance to at least correct this mistake, even if I couldn't change any of the others. So, Billy? She gently took my hand. Looking at me, tears filled her eyes as she began to release the pain and disappointment that had been buried for so long. My husband, she said quietly. And for me, you will always be my husband. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine the disappointment and pain I caused you. I'm ashamed of my actions and that they destroyed the most precious thing in my life, our marriage. And yes, it was the most precious thing, but I took my eyes off its guard. Instead of protecting him, I looked only at myself. At the same time, I allowed him to be poisoned. One evening, I destroyed our family. I ruined our future. Because of me, our children had to divide their time between mother and father instead of just enjoying us as a family. I fought to comprehend what I heard. If I thought my mind was in chaos, it was nothing compared to my heart. What do you want, Deirdre? What are you hoping for? What I want is a chance to come back into your life. I hope this little trick they pulled will make you question whether you want to spend the rest of your life with Karen. You think I'm going to leave Karen and take you back? She smiled. I won't lie, but I know that won't happen. I know you, and I know that little stunt has damaged your relationship with Karen more than she realizes. I hope that after this, your relationship with her will not be exclusive. I pray that you will start dating other women again and allow me to become one of them. Billy, forgive me for this ambush, but not for myself, because I can finally bare my soul. But for you. Whatever you decide to do, please make sure that you are doing it for yourself and not for anyone else. I know you have a lot to think about, so I'll leave you alone. I love you, Billy. Whatever you decide will remain forever. She touched my arm softly as she passed by. I looked into her eyes and saw in them a tired sadness mixed with relief. I felt the same tiredness, but no relief. I sat on the bench on the patio, stunned by Deirdre's confession and proposal. I finally asked myself whether there could be any relationship with my ex-wife at all, even if I wanted one. I heard the patio door open and felt Karen cautiously approach me. Her timid voice made me focus back on my fiancée, the woman who claimed to love me. Bill? I didn't look up. I tried my best to separate my thoughts from my emotions, afraid they would flare up. Bill, are we okay? No, I answered quietly. And what you ask says a lot about our relationship. I know, she said, holding back sobs. I'm really sorry. The problem is that you're not sorry enough for doing this to me. Even now, you would do it to me again, right? I'm sorry, Bill, she said quietly and sobbed. But I really needed to know this. I know, I interrupted her, that I loved you more than my ex-wife, and I told you about it more than once. I think actions speak louder than words, right? We were both silent for a few moments, trying to say what needed to be said. Finally, I took a deep breath and looked at her. Sorry, Karen. I tried, I said quietly. I tried to give you every reason to trust me, but you couldn't. I think the fear and doubt from your past are so strong that you are unable to trust. No, she screamed. It is not true. Today, you showed me that I can trust you. You did something very hard and painful, and you did it for us. No, I sighed. I did it for you. All those earlier things, like couples counseling, the ones I did for us. But today was all for you. So now you're telling me that I passed some test, that's all well and good, but I have to ask, at what cost? I'm really sorry, Bill. I needed to know for sure. That's the problem. You needed it, but what about my needs? Karen, you're not the only one with trust issues. You say you can trust me now, but now it's obvious that I can't trust you. If I passed my test, then you failed yours. Today, your fears and insecurities have surpassed your imaginary love for me. What happens next week if something makes you doubt me or even us? What hoops will I have to jump through to gain your trust again? Karen, I said quietly, I can't live like this. I am not strong enough to carry this load alone, even for a while. Maybe I can do this in the future, but not now. Bill, please, I'm so sorry, she said in a trembling voice. I'm sorry. Of course I forgive you, I said calmly. But you knew that I would forgive, didn't you? You probably even counted on it to justify your actions. She nodded slightly and lowered her head in embarrassment. But things are different now, aren't they? She whispered. I nodded. So what do we have left? I sat in silence. I was tired, very tired. I was exhausted. I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to be betrayed either. I don't know. I know the engagement is broken, but whether we still date is up to you. Bill, it's not fair. I know I hurt you. No, I don't think you know. I lost my temper. Maybe if I contact your ex-husband and son and arrange a surprise weekend for you three. Of course, I won't tell you about this until you arrive. Then you could overcome any problems you still have with them. I looked into her eyes and saw understanding dawning in them. Her tears soon followed. Of course, then I'll tell you that it was for your own good, and then I'll remind you how proud I am of you for facing your demons. Maybe then you will understand how much it hurts me. Now, her tears flowed freely. I was surprised that I had no desire to rush to her aid. I was probably in a daze. I'm so sorry, she sobbed quietly. Me too, I sighed. Now I have to start all over again. Do you still love me? She asked weakly. Yes, I think so. To be honest, I don't know what to think right now. I know I still care about you, but everything has changed, and I don't know how. You know that I love you, right? I probably shouldn't ask this question now, but yes, I believe that you love me as much as you can now. As much as I can, she asked quietly. I nodded. But that's not enough, is it? I would be lying if I said that was the case. Maybe someday our love will become stronger, if that's what we both want. But in the meantime, we'll go back to just dating? I sighed. I think it will be better this way. So, will you date her too? Deirdre? I do not know. Maybe. I had never even thought about it before, and certainly not during the conversation. I guess as things stand now, I'll have to decide what to do with her. Listen, Karen, I'm very tired. I need to go home and pack some things. Luckily, I still have an apartment, so I'll stay there until we figure everything out. I'll call you in a few days, and we'll decide what to do next. I stood up and hugged her. I felt the moisture of her tears on my chest. I kissed her on the top of her head, pulled away and kissed her softly on the lips. Goodbye, Karen, I said, and returned to my parents' house. I knew I had to tell them something. Deirdre called it closure. My mind was racing, but I could hear the quiet sobs of my ex-fiancée behind me. I found both parents in the kitchen. Their looks told me what to expect. The mother looked worried but determined, while the father seemed barely able to contain his anger. This meant that my mother would try to justify their actions while my father would tell me to just forget about it. It was a routine they had for most of my life. Unfortunately, it was about to end. "Well," Mom began, "it wasn't so bad now, was it?" "I think it depends on the point of view," I replied calmly. "From my point of view, it was very painful." "Sometimes it hurts to do the right thing," my father grumbled. "You know." "Yes," I sighed. "That's why everything is so difficult." Not only was it very difficult for me to talk to Deirdre, but it was even more painful to be stabbed in the back by those I had previously trusted. "This will not happen again." "Oh no, honey, it wasn't like that at all," Mom began. "Of course it was," I intervened. "I said no, but you still had to do it. Regardless of my wishes or the fact that it was my decision, you decided that what you thought was best should be shoved down my throat. But like I said, it won't happen again. I thought you two learned something when you sent Rose and Monica away, but apparently not. You either can't or don't want to stop. So, just like with my sisters, this is goodbye. I am very sorry that you will not have any of your children with you in your old age, but this is the price you have to pay for bullying and constant attempts to manipulate them." "Don't you dare threaten us, boy," the father barked. "That's not a threat," I snapped. "I'll just get it over with. If it makes you feel better, I'll send a card from time to time. Until then, don't try to call or contact me. I won't answer." With these words, I turned and left my parents' house for what I suspected was the last time. Behind me, I could hear my mother's pleas and cries, drowned out by my father's swearing and screams. This circus of interference is finally over. I would like to say that everything calmed down later, but that would not be true. I cut off all contact with my parents, even canceled my home phone number and got a different cell number. Of course, that didn't stop them from trying to corner me at home or at work. It didn't help that the few times I got back together with Karen, my relationship with my parents became the main topic of discussion each time. That wasn't the only reason we stopped dating. It became painfully clear to both of us that everything we had was slowly dying. Ultimately, she was not emotionally healthy enough to help me overcome my mistrust of her. It wasn't malicious, but it was what it was. Our final breakup was mutually expected. After that, I decided I needed to take a clean break. I tried to get a transfer, but my company was not some global corporation, so there were only a few options and they were not available. I applied for and accepted a similar position at a much lower salary, a couple states away. I met Deirdre once before I left. I met her and Brad for lunch and informed them of my upcoming departure. The news did not please them, but it did not surprise them either. My parents bombarded our children. Our daughters were far enough away that they avoided the mess by simply blocking certain phone numbers. Brad wasn't so lucky. When we met, he told me that he was upset that he was forced to make such decisions. I understood, but my heart was still drawn to him. I didn't want to put my son in that position, but I'm not sure circumstances would have allowed it otherwise. He eventually cut off contact with them too. Before I left, Deirdre asked if I had thought about her proposal, and I replied that I had. I asked if I could visit her when I returned to town. She smiled and said she really hoped so. I made my way out of the city without much fanfare and found myself becoming accustomed to my surroundings. Several months had passed, and I was enjoying my new job, although money was tight. I even went on a few dates, although they didn't promise to be more than one night. There were 2 women I dated several times. Celia was an attractive woman I met at work. She was a few years older than me, but in great shape, because she was really into yoga. Lori was a cute little blonde divorcee in her early 40s. She was very fat, but she had very beautiful blue eyes and a beautiful face. I was sitting with a glass of wine, contemplating my current status, when I heard a knock on my apartment door. When I answered, I realized that everything would change again. "Hi," she said quietly. "I was wondering if I could bother you a little. I'm thinking about renting one of the apartments in this complex, but would like to talk to some of the current residents first. Do you mind if I come in?" She didn't have the body or looks to stop the movement, but she made my heart skip a beat. She was a tall, thin brunette with shoulder-length hair and matte golden tips. Large glasses with gold wire frames made her eyes appear even larger. They also reinforced the ever-changing looks of hope and determination, doubt and fear that danced in her eyes. "Deirdre," I said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "Well, after my big speech about my actions, I thought it would be hypocritical of me not to try to show you that I still think very seriously about you. And you kind of asked me out on a date before you left. Deirdre, I asked if I could visit you when I got back to town." "Yes, but it takes you too long to come back," she said with a shy smile. "Billy," she said, her voice hoarse with emotion, "I'm trying to find my balance. On the one hand, I want to give you the opportunity to start over, but on the other hand, I need to make sure you know how much I want to show you that we can still have some kind of future. I know I'm not very good at balancing, and I'm probably already on the verge of stalking mania, but I need you to know. If you want, I'll start over too. I know our marriage is dead, but I believe we still have feelings for each other. I'd like to see where we could go if we started dating again. Deirdre is moving into my apartment complex." "Well, that was a remark. Oh, I'd be very happy to rent an apartment here, but I thought it might bother you. I'm actually staying at a local motel right now. This morning, I was interviewed for a position in the area. The position is solid, even if it is a level below where I am now, but it looks like I can regain that level within a year or two. They offered me a job, but I asked them to give me a couple of days because I needed to talk to you first. Deirdre, when we divorced, I stopped influencing your decisions. In fact, I lost influence even before that." Her face wrinkled slightly and she looked away. Turning around, she looked me straight in the eyes. "You're right, of course, but I'm trying to change that. If you don't want me here, I'll leave and won't bother you anymore." "Look, Billy, I'm trying to start over. I started by changing my appearance a little and am planning to move. No matter what you decide, I needed to move on from the past and start over. I have 3 more interviews scheduled in other cities for the end of this month. There is a very good chance that I will take one of those positions, but I would really like to start here since the 2 people I want in my life will be here in this area." I was about to answer, but then her words struck me. "2?" She smiled softly. "Well, besides you, Brad also wants to move here after graduation. I expect him to call in a week or 2 to make sure you're okay. I think your parents are driving him crazy even in college, and he wants to start over too." "Damn it," I said, shaking my head. "Will they never learn? I wish I could find a way to stop them, but they just won't stop. I'm sorry for Brad too," she said quietly. "He shouldn't have to go through this either. As for your parents, I think Karen still talks to them daily." "Okay," I grinned. "Maybe they'll adopt her. This is a very scary thought." Deirdre laughed. I felt my heart jump at the sound of her laughter. It reminded me of much better days when the anger and pain weren't so intense. "Billy, I'm not looking for any guarantees or promises." Well, that's not entirely true. It would be more accurate to say that I do not expect any promises or guarantees. What I'm looking for is a chance to start over. I really want to do this with you as a part of this, even if it's a small part. "Well," she said, taking a deep breath, "what do you think about it?" My thoughts were racing. I was both excited and flattered that she wanted to move closer to me. To some extent, I felt like I was being manipulated into making a decision. On the other hand, I felt like I was given another chance. I didn't try to get Deirdre out of my life. It was more in response to the situation and all the pressure I was feeling at the time. Then I needed to completely separate from her, and it developed into something adamant. Now this pressure has disappeared. No one but me was pulling the strings. I still felt pain and betrayal, but they were no longer as stunning as they were then. I also knew that I still loved her, but my trust was deeply damaged. Is it possible to restore it? Perhaps, but it will take time and will never be what it was before. And yet, will it be better or worse than what it is? I looked at Deirdre and stepped back, allowing her to enter my apartment. "I think you will enjoy living in these apartments. The maintenance is easy to work with and quite quiet. My decision was simple. The only way to find out is to try both possibilities. I can continue to date other women, but also Deirdre. How long this will last is anyone's guess. I think I'll probably end up only dating Deirdre at some point. She definitely has an inner way to my heart. She knows me better than any of the women I might date, but she's also dealing with the ghost of our past marriage, and that will never completely go away. Will I ever get married again? I doubt. Being exclusive with Deirdre or Celia or Lori or even whoever sounds good to me. Marriage, very doubtful. With my broken marriage and failed engagement in the past, I doubt I'll ever want to get married again. But who knows? Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.